Welcome to Stories by Ricardo. Here, we don't just tell stories, we bring real emotions to life. Each tale you hear is packed with lessons, heartbreak, redemption, and unforgettable moments. So relax, open your heart, and let today's story take you on a journey you'll never forget. Once upon a time in the heart of Kenya, in a small village near Kisumu, there lived a young woman named Achieng. Life had never been kind to her. She had grown up in a mud-walled hut with no electricity, no running water, and no one to call family except her aging mother. Her father had died when she was only 6, and since then, survival had been their only priority. Education was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. Achieng dropped out of school at 16 to help her mother sell roasted maize by the roadside, but even that was never enough. When her mother fell ill, the little they had left vanished quickly. The sickness dragged on for months, and then one rainy night, Achieng's mother closed her eyes and never opened them again. Achieng was only 21 at the time, alone, broke, and heartbroken. For weeks she survived on the kindness of neighbours and the mercy of local churches. Eventually, a distant cousin, Auntie Jane, visited from Nairobi. She wasn't very warm, but she offered Achieng a chance, a job, a new life, a housegirl position in Nairobi. The pay wasn't much, but it came with food, shelter, and possibly something better in the future. Achieng said yes. She had never left the village before. When the matatu pulled into the noisy city full of tall buildings, fast cars, and people with rushed faces, Achieng's head spun. Auntie Jane took her to a large mansion in Runda, past electric fences and beautiful gardens. The house looked like a palace from a dream. Achieng had never seen anything like it. Her feet trembled as she stepped out of the car with her small bag. The woman who opened the gate was called Mama Njeri. She was the chief housekeeper, short, round, and with eyes that missed nothing. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how Achieng had travelled. She only asked one thing. "Do you know how to work?" Achieng nodded quickly. That was enough for Mama Njeri. She took her inside, handed her a uniform, and showed her a tiny room behind the kitchen. The floor was tiled. There was a real mattress on the bed. It felt like a miracle to Achieng. The next day, work began. Achieng scrubbed floors until her hands stung. She learned how to operate machines she didn't know existed, vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, washing machines with lights and buttons. She woke at 4:30 every morning and went to bed well past 10. Still, she never complained. She was grateful. Nairobi was harsh, but this house was peaceful. For 2 weeks she didn't see the man of the house. She only heard about him in whispers. His name was Mr. Barasa, a billionaire. He owned properties in Nairobi, Mombasa, and even Kigali. He had investments in everything from real estate to tech. People called him the Quiet Tycoon. He was also a widower. His wife had died 5 years earlier, leaving him with a daughter, Vanessa, who was now 5 years old. One Thursday evening, as Achieng was mopping the entrance hallway, the large wooden door creaked open. She didn't look up at first. Then she heard hurried little feet, Vanessa's. The child was running to greet her father, but tripped on her own sandals. Before anyone else could move, Achieng dropped the mop and rushed forward, catching the girl just before she hit the ground. "It's okay," she said softly, brushing dirt off Vanessa's knees. "You're safe." Vanessa looked up at her and smiled. Achieng smiled back, unaware that the man standing by the door had paused and was watching them carefully. That was the first time Mr. Barasa noticed her. After that day, everything changed. Vanessa began to cling to Achieng. She followed her everywhere. She refused to eat unless Achieng was nearby. She even cried when Achieng wasn't the one to tuck her into bed. At first, Mama Njeri complained, but Mr. Barasa didn't mind. He told the housekeeper to let things be. And so, Achieng's role shifted. She was still a house girl, yes, but now she was also Vanessa's companion. She picked her up from school, helped her with her homework, and even played dolls with her in the garden. Sometimes she ate in the same room with Vanessa, something unheard of before. Mr. Barassa began to speak to her. At first, it was only to ask about Vanessa's meals or her homework. Then the conversations grew. He began to ask about Achieng herself, where she came from, if she had any siblings, what her dreams used to be. Achieng always answered shyly. She didn't know what to make of the attention. She never looked him in the eyes for too long. But something about his voice, deep and calm, made her feel safe. One evening, after Vanessa had gone to bed, Achieng was sitting quietly under the mango tree in the compound. The night was cool, and she was humming an old Luo lullaby to herself when she heard footsteps behind her. It was him. He didn't say much. He just stood there for a moment, looking up at the stars. "I haven't heard that song in years," he said. Achieng smiled, still looking down. "My mother used to sing it whenever she couldn't sleep." There was a long pause. Then he said, "You remind me of her." That night, Achieng cried quietly in her room, not because she was sad, but because for the first time in her life, someone important had seen her, really seen her, but not everyone was happy. Wycliffe, the driver, had noticed how Mr. Barassa often spoke to Achieng now. He didn't like it. He believed Achieng was just a village girl who didn't deserve to be near someone like their boss. He began spreading rumours among the other workers that Achieng was using charm, that she had bewitched Vanessa, that she was after the billionaire's money. One afternoon, while Achieng was busy in the kitchen, Wycliffe sneaked into her room. He took photos of her old clothes, her worn-out Bible, and a faded photo of her late mother. He printed the photos and left them on Mr. Barassa's desk with a note. "Be careful who you let near your daughter." Later that evening, Mr. Barassa found the note. He looked at the pictures for a long time. Then he folded the paper neatly and put it in a drawer. The next morning, Wycliffe was fired. Days turned into weeks. Then one day, Vanessa fell seriously ill. She had high fever, chest pain, and began to cough constantly. The family doctor diagnosed her with pneumonia. She was admitted to the hospital immediately. Vanessa cried and begged for only one person to stay with her: Achieng. Without hesitation, Mr. Barassa instructed the hospital staff to admit Achieng along with his daughter. She stayed beside the child for 3 nights straight, barely sleeping, feeding her, changing her clothes, reading her stories, singing to her softly, like a real mother would. On the 4th morning, as she sat beside the sleeping child, exhausted, her head resting against the wall, Mr. Barassa entered the room carrying a flask. "You haven't eaten," he said, holding it out to her. Achieng looked up, her eyes tired. "I didn't want to leave her alone." He walked in and sat beside her. For a while, neither of them said anything. The hum of machines filled the silence. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said eventually. Achieng looked at him, unsure of what to say. She simply lowered her gaze. "Do you ever miss home?" he asked. She nodded. "Every day." "And do you want to go back?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not like this. I want to go back proud, different." That night, something shifted between them. But outside the hospital room, gossip had already begun to spread. The billionaire's house girl. "And him?" People whispered. Some laughed. Others were angry. But inside that room, nothing else mattered. Only the little girl they both cared for, and the growing silence that felt like something unspoken was waiting to bloom. Achieng didn't know it yet, but the life she once knew was gone forever, and the life ahead would shock even her. When Achieng returned from the hospital with Vanessa, something about the house felt different. It wasn't the walls or the floors, or even the neatly trimmed hedges that curved along the driveway. It was the air. the silence, the way the other workers paused their conversations the moment she stepped into a room. They no longer looked her in the eye, and when they did, there was something behind their glances. Envy, suspicion, perhaps even fear. She tried to ignore it. After all, she was only doing what her heart had led her to do, care for a little girl who needed love. Vanessa was still recovering, but she smiled more now, laughed even. Her appetite had returned. She no longer clung to Achiang like she was the last branch on a sinking boat, but she still insisted Achiang be the one to tuck her in at night. Mr. Barasa barely spoke those first few days back, not because he was avoiding her, but because he too seemed caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. He would leave early in the morning, return late at night, and sometimes stand outside Vanessa's door just to listen to the lullabies Achiang sang before bedtime. He never entered, he never interrupted. He just listened. And sometimes he smiled. One afternoon, Achiang was watering the flowers by the back garden when he appeared behind her, as silent as the wind. She turned and froze when she saw him, her heart thumping like a drum. "I hope they're not giving you trouble," he said gently, referring to the staff. Achiang shook her head. "No, sir." "Please," he said with a small smile, "stop calling me sir." She looked down, unsure of what else to say. He stepped closer, but not too close, just enough that she could feel his presence. "You've done something for Vanessa no one else could, not even her teachers, not even the therapists. You brought her back to life." Achiang's hands gripped the watering can tighter. "Thank you," he said, and then, after a pause, "for everything." She nodded, still unable to look up at him. That night, she sat alone on her small bed and stared at the ceiling for hours. She had spent years believing she was invisible, that no one would ever truly see her. But now she wasn't sure what was happening. The following weekend, Mama Nigeri called Achiang into the staff quarters and asked her to sit. "You and the boss, what's going on?" she asked bluntly. Achiang's eyes widened. "Nothing, madam. I only care for the child." Mama Nigeri scoffed. "You think we don't see it? You think we don't notice how he looks at you?" Achiang stayed silent. The older woman leaned forward. "Let me warn you. Rich men play with poor girls like toys. When they're done, they throw you away. Don't let this house fool you." Achiang stood slowly. "I've never disrespected this house or myself. I only care for Vanessa." Mama Nigeri waved her off. "You'll see. When he brings a real woman home, you'll remember this talk." But that talk never left Achiang. It haunted her through the week. She cleaned slower, smiled less. And one evening, when Vanessa hugged her and said, "I wish you were my mummy," she had to rush out of the room so the child wouldn't see her cry. Meanwhile, news had begun to spread beyond the mansion. Photos of Mr. Barasa entering the hospital with a young woman by his side had been leaked by a nosy nurse. The blogs were on fire. Is this the billionaire's new woman? Billionaire Barasa finds love again? Meet the mystery girl who saved his daughter. Achiang had no idea about any of this. She didn't use social media. She didn't own a smartphone. She lived her life one day at a time, until the day she went to the market. She was carrying a basket of groceries when a group of women in the vegetable section started whispering. One pointed at her. Another giggled. "That's the girl from the photos, the one with Barasa." Achiang's heart raced. She left the market immediately, her hands trembling as she clutched the basket. When she returned home, Mama Nigeri was waiting at the door. "Come with me," she said. She led her to the living room, and there, sitting calmly with his laptop open, was Mr. Barasa. "Achiang," he said, motioning for her to sit, "there's something we need to talk about." She sat, her legs weak. He turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a gossip site, and her photo was right there. standing beside him at the hospital, holding Vanessa. "I never meant for this to happen," she said quickly. "I never told anyone. I know," he said calmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She looked at him, confused. "But people are talking. They will continue to talk, and I'm tired of hiding behind their words." He stood up and walked over to her. "I know this may come as a surprise, but I've thought about this for a long time. You're kind, strong, humble, and you love my daughter in a way no one else ever has." Her heart was thumping. "Achieng, will you marry me?" she gasped. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. He took her hands gently. "You don't have to answer now, but I need you to know that I mean it, not out of pity, not out of loneliness, but because you are the woman I want beside me." Tears filled her eyes. That night, Achieng sat alone in her room, shaking. She thought of her mother, of the hunger, of the day she begged to wash people's clothes just to get ugali, of the girls who mocked her in the village, of the teachers who said she'd never be more than a house girl. Now a billionaire wanted to make her his wife. In the morning, she returned to the living room. Mr. Barasa was there, dressed in casual clothes, sipping tea. She walked up to him and whispered, "Yes." He stood and smiled. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes." The wedding was small but elegant. Only close friends, family, and a few of the staff were invited. Vanessa wore a white dress and held Achieng's hand tightly throughout the ceremony. The media wasn't allowed in, but that didn't stop the story from exploding online. From house girl to billionaire's wife. A true Cinderella story in Nairobi. Some mocked, others were inspired, but Achieng didn't care. She had found love, family, and a life she never dreamed possible. Months later, as she stood on the balcony of their new home in Karen, watching Vanessa play in the garden, she placed a hand on her stomach. She was 3 months pregnant. She smiled, whispering to the wind, "Mama, I made it." And indeed, she had. Lesson: never look down on anyone because of where they start. Life can change in a moment, and the person you ignore today might be the one you admire tomorrow. Kindness, humility, and a good heart will always shine, no matter how poor the background. Thank you for watching Stories by Ricardo. If this story touched you, made you think, or left you speechless, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. New stories drop every week, raw, real, and deeply emotional. Until next time, always remember, every struggle has a story, and every story matters.